In the depths of the Cold War, the most dangerous battles were never seen. No explosions, no headlines, no witnesses, just silence. Miles beneath the ocean's surface, American submarines moved through darkness, so complete, even sound became a weapon. Their mission was simple to describe and almost impossible to execute. Find the Soviet fleet, follow it, and never be detected, because if they failed, the consequences wouldn't just be tactical. They could be nuclear. This is the story of the Silent Hunters, the U.S. submarines that tracked Soviet fleets through the world's oceans and helped prevent a war no one could afford to fight. At the height of the Cold War, the oceans became one of the most critical battlegrounds on Earth. The United States and the Soviet Union both understood that control beneath the sea meant control over something far more important than territory. It meant control over nuclear capability. Soviet ballistic missile submarines carried nuclear weapons capable of striking the United States from anywhere in the world's oceans. Hidden beneath the surface, they represented a constant, moving threat, one that could not be easily tracked or predicted. For American defense planners, this created a dangerous problem. You couldn't stop what you couldn't find. And if Soviet submarines could operate undetected, they could position themselves for a strike with little warning. In a conflict where minutes mattered, that uncertainty was unacceptable. The United States needed visibility, not just on land, not just in the air, but underwater. And that was far more difficult, because the ocean is vast, chaotic, unforgiving. Sound travels differently. Visibility is nearly non-existent. Detection depends on subtle signals, vibrations, echoes, faint acoustic signatures that can be lost in the noise of the sea. Finding another submarine in that environment wasn't just challenging, it was an art, and the Soviet Union was improving. Their submarine fleet was growing, larger, quieter, more capable. New classes of submarines extended their reach. Missile systems increased their range. Patrols became more frequent. The threat wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was active, moving, hidden. For the United States, the challenge became clear. If Soviet submarines were the hidden threat, then American submarines would have to become the hidden answer, not just to detect them, but to follow them, silently, relentlessly, without ever being noticed. This required a new level of capability. Submarines that were quieter than anything before. Sensors that could detect the faintest sounds in the ocean. Crews trained to operate in conditions where a single mistake, one noise, one miscalculation, could reveal their position instantly, because in this environment, being detected didn't mean retreat. It could mean death, or worse, escalation. The United States began to refine a strategy that would redefine underwater warfare. Instead of waiting for threats to emerge, they would go out and find them, track them, shadow them, know where they were at all times. It was a mission built on patience, precision, and absolute control, because the goal wasn't to attack. It was to understand, to ensure that if the Soviets moved, the United States would already know. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where invisible operations shaped global stability, consider subscribing, because what these submarines did beneath the surface will remain unknown to most of the world, even as it helped keep that world from sliding into conflict. Deep beneath the ocean, the first of these missions began. No announcements, no recognition, just a submarine disappearing into the depths, and somewhere ahead of it, another submarine, waiting to be found. Once submerged, the world disappeared. No light, no horizon, no reference points, only instruments and sound inside an American attack submarine. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, and quiet. The mission wasn't speed. It wasn't aggression. It was silence, because in the underwater domain, silence meant survival. And more importantly, it meant invisibility. The submarines assigned to these missions, classes like the early USS Skipjack, SSN 585, and later the far quieter Los Angeles-class submarine, were built with a single objective in mind: to hear without being heard. Their hulls were designed to reduce noise. Their machinery was isolated to minimize vibration. Their propellers engineered to move through water without creating detectable signatures. Every detail mattered, because even the smallest sound could travel for miles. Inside the control room, the most important position wasn't at the helm. It was sonar. Operators sat in near darkness, headphones pressed tight, listening to a world most people would never understand. A distant hum, a faint rhythm, the low-frequency signature of machinery moving through water. To an untrained ear, it was meaningless. To them, it was everything, because every submarine had a sound, a unique acoustic fingerprint, and once identified, it could be tracked. The process wasn't immediate. It could take hours, even days, to confirm a contact. A single detection wasn't enough. It had to be verified, compared, matched against known profiles. Only then could they say with confidence they had found something, and if they were right, that something could be a Soviet submarine. Once contact was established, the mission changed. Now it was no longer about searching. It was about following, maintaining distance, staying just close enough to track, but far enough to remain undetected. Because if the Soviet submarine realized it was being followed, everything could escalate instantly. The hunter would become the hunted. Inside the submarine, tension never disappeared, even during long stretches of quiet. Every crew member understood the reality of their position. They were operating in contested waters, tracking an adversary with no backup, no visibility, and no margin for error. Above them, the ocean gave no indication of what was happening below. Ships passed, waves moved, the world continued, completely unaware that beneath the surface, two submarines were engaged in a silent game of strategy. One tried to remain hidden, the other determined to find it. As Soviet submarines became quieter and more advanced, the challenge increased. New propulsion systems reduced noise. Improved designs made detection more difficult. The gap was closing, which meant American submarines had to evolve. Faster sensors, better acoustic analysis, more refined tactics. Because in this environment, technology alone wasn't enough. It had to be combined with skill, with discipline, with the ability to make decisions based on incomplete information and still be right. And yet, despite the difficulty, the missions continued. Patrol after patrol, contact after contact. The United States was building something critical. Not just a fleet, but a network of awareness beneath the ocean. A system that could track movement, anticipate positioning, and reduce uncertainty in one of the most unpredictable domains of warfare. Because knowing where a Soviet submarine was changed everything. It meant that if tensions escalated, the United States wouldn't be reacting blindly. It would already be in position, already aware, already prepared. But the deeper these missions went, the more dangerous they became. Because at some point, silence wouldn't be enough, and the moment of detection could come without warning. The most dangerous moment in any mission was the moment of proximity, when distance closed, when silence became fragile, when two submarines, unseen, unheard by the world above, moved within range of each other. Because in that space, the margin for error disappeared. Inside the American submarine, the sonar contact would grow clearer, stronger, closer. What had once been a distant signal now carried detail, engine cycles, propeller rhythm, even subtle changes in speed or direction. They weren't just tracking anymore. They were studying. Every movement of the Soviet submarine revealed intent, a turn, a slowdown, a change in depth. Each one had meaning. Each one had to be interpreted correctly, because one wrong assumption could place them directly in danger. The mission demanded something extraordinary, to remain invisible while operating close enough to understand everything. And that balance was never stable. It shifted constantly, with the ocean, with the movement of the target, with every decision made inside both submarines. There were moments when the distance became dangerously small, when the American submarine had to slow, adjust, reposition itself in silence, so complete that even internal noise had to be minimized. Crew members moved carefully. Equipment was handled with precision. Even small sounds, tools, footsteps, a dropped object, could travel to the hull and into the water. And in that environment, sound was exposure, because the Soviet submarine was listening to its own sonar operators scanning the darkness. searching for the same faint signals, trying to determine if they were alone or being followed. This was the true nature of underwater warfare. Not speed, not firepower, but perception. Who could detect first? Who could understand faster? Who could remain unseen longer? And sometimes the situation became even more unstable. There were instances when submarines passed close enough that a miscalculation, just a few degrees in course, could lead to collision. Steel meeting steel in total darkness. No warning, no escape, just impact. And in a nuclear-armed environment, that kind of accident could have consequences far beyond the ocean. But even without collision, the risk remained constant. Because if a Soviet submarine confirmed it was being tracked, the response could be immediate, evasive maneuvers, sudden changes in speed and depth, or worse, preparation for engagement. And that's where the mission could shift in an instant, from observation to confrontation. Inside the American submarine, there were no dramatic alarms, no shouted commands, only controlled responses. Adjust course, reduce speed, maintain distance. Every decision calculated, every movement designed to preserve the one advantage that mattered most, remaining undetected. Because once that was lost, everything else changed. The mission, the risk, the outcome. Yet despite the tension, despite the constant possibility of discovery, these submarines continue to operate in that narrow space between presence and invisibility. Again and again, mission after mission, tracking, listening, learning. They built something that couldn't be seen on a map, a pattern, an understanding of Soviet behavior beneath the ocean, where they patrolled, how they moved, when they changed position. And that knowledge had power, because it meant that the United States wasn't guessing. It was observing, not reacting blindly, but anticipating. And in the Cold War, anticipation could prevent escalation before it even began. Still, the danger never disappeared, because all it would take was one moment, one sound, one detection, for the silent hunt to become something far more dangerous. In the end, the silent hunters never needed to fire, and that was their greatest success. For decades, American submarines tracked Soviet fleets across the world's oceans, unseen, unacknowledged, and almost entirely unknown to the public. They followed ballistic missile submarines, shadowed attack submarines, mapped patrol routes, built a picture of movement beneath the surface that no satellite could provide. And they did it without triggering conflict, because the purpose of these missions was never destruction. It was control. Control over uncertainty, control over escalation, control over a domain where a single miscalculation could have consequences far beyond the ocean. The intelligence gathered beneath the waves shaped decisions at the highest levels of government. It informed strategy, guided deployments, and ensured that if the Soviet Union moved, the United States already understood what that movement meant. That advantage didn't come from visibility. It came from discipline, from technology refined to operate in silence, from crews trained to function under constant pressure, without recognition, because no one outside those submarines would ever know what they were doing. No headlines would report their missions. No public acknowledgement would follow their success. And yet, their impact was undeniable. They helped maintain a balance that defined the Cold War, a balance built not just on weapons, but on awareness. Because when both sides understood that their movements were being tracked, that their submarines were not completely hidden, it changed behavior. It introduced caution. It reinforced restraint. And in a conflict where escalation could happen quickly, that restraint mattered. The silent hunters proved something fundamental. That power doesn't always come from what is seen. Sometimes it comes from what remains hidden, from the ability to operate undetected, to observe without being observed, to act without being noticed, and in doing so, to shape outcomes without ever appearing to be part of them. Today, that legacy continues. Modern submarines are quieter, more advanced, more capable, but the principle remains the same. Control the unseen, understand the unknown, stay one step ahead without ever revealing your position. Because in the Cold War, Victory wasn't always measured in battles won. It was measured in crises avoided. And deep beneath the surface, in the silent, unseen world of submarine warfare, the United States held that line. For more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Because some of the most important moments in history didn't happen where people could see them, they happened in silence.